We have a very interesting topic today. We are going to be talking with a couple of the pilots who rescued over 240 people from a wildfire in California last month. We'll be able to talk with them. If you have any questions, I certainly encourage you to do so. It's going to be a really interesting topic today. The first person who'll be speaking with today is Chief Warrant Officer 5th Joseph Rosamond. He was the pilot of the Chinook. And we have Chief Warrant Officer Kipp, who is the Black Hawk pilot. A little later in the presentation today, we will have Chris Martino, who is our Senior Director of Operations and International Affairs. He's going to be talking about the HAI Fire Conference that's coming up in next month. I mentioned questions. If you do have questions for either of the warrant officers who are flying the mission, please use the question module that's in the control panel off to the side of your screen or at the bottom of your screen. If you type your question in, we will receive it and we will do our best to ask it towards the end of the webinar. This webinar is being recorded. If you would like to watch it later, share it with people. We will be sending out the link tomorrow and we will have it on our website and through posting it through social media. As most people know, here in the United States, California is really no stranger to wildland fires, but this year has seen a significant increase in fire activity, even by their standards. It's also been one of the worst ones for the entire West Coast, and this has been a rough year for fires literally around the world, as Australia can attest as well. I think it goes without saying that helicopters do play a significant role in fighting these wildfires around the world. To those of you who are out on the fire lines, please know that HAI appreciates the work that you're performing. We've seen you on the news and your work is incredibly impressive. While you're working the lines, please be safe. Tragically, we have lost a couple of pilots earlier this year on wildland fires, and we really don't want to lose any more. In every fire season, there are also people who do extraordinary things with their helicopters, and today we have the distinct honor to meet two of these aviators. You may recall watching their work on the news about a month ago when the 40th Combat Aviation Brigade from California National Guard rescued literally hundreds of people from an approaching fire. I'd now like to introduce you to Chief Warrant Officer Joseph Rosamond and Chief Warrant Officer Kipp. Gentlemen, please turn on your cameras and join us. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. It's truly an honor to have you with us. I would like to first ask that you please introduce yourselves to our audience. Mr. Rosamond, perhaps you can go first.
Hi, my name is Joseph Rosamond, and I'm a full-time guardsman for the California National Guard flying Chinooks.
Okay, and Mr. Goding?
And I am CW5 Kipp. I'm also a full-time National Guard member with California National Guard, and I fly UH-60 Mike Blackhawk.
Okay, welcome. Now, as I recall, the fire that you responded to, this event took place on September 5th. The beach fire had trapped campers at the Mammoth Pool campground, and this is nearly due east of Merced, California, for the people who are familiar with the California geography. And is that in the actual Sierra Nevada mountains, or is this in the foothills of the Sierra Nevadas?
Yeah, it's. I think that fire completely. Yeah, it started in at least the area in Mammoth Pools. That's well into the actual Sierra Nevadas.
Okay, and so from what I understand, it took 3 trips to bring everybody out, covering 10 hours, and you ended up rescuing 242 people that night. That's just an amazing figure. Let's start with you, Chief Rosamond. When did you first hear about the mission, and what planning and preparations did you take before lifting off that day?
So I got a mass text from our operations center after they received the mission tasking, and so that text went out from our one of the other chief pilots here, and so I happened to be nearby and just responded saying, hey, I'm available to go, and I live pretty close, so my response time was pretty quick. and the unit had just gotten off of another fire activation and had just been reset like midweek that week prior to it. So I had not been a part of that. So I felt like I needed to have availability for this call up since those guys were kind of resetting. So I got the text, responded to it, and was then notified of who my crew was based on who else had responded to the text. And then immediately got dressed and came into work. I was probably here within a half hour starting to do risk assessments and preliminary planning and weather checks and that sort of thing. But yeah, go ahead.
I was going to ask, what time of day did this come in? Because I understand the mission took place mostly after dark.
Yeah, so the original text came in right around, I want to say 3:30, 4 o'clock or so. And by the time it was in here, I was in work probably around 4:30 in the afternoon, and just waiting for the rest of the crew to come in while I was starting to do some of that preliminary paperwork.
Okay, Chief Gotti, now you were at a different location than Chief Rosamond, is that correct? Or what was your activity like?
That is correct. We were very similar. He got the notification out of Stockton. We got the notification out of Fresno that there was a need for us to be available. So did a quick text to get off to some crew members, same as Joe. There had been a previous Blackhawk on a fire. So we were trying to get people available that weren't the same people that had just come back off of 2 weeks of a fire. So text some people, see if they were available, and started heading into work. Parallel planning with Joe, getting performance considerations, weather considerations, getting the aircraft untied, just getting it ready so that when these people answered, we were ready to go with an aircraft and just wait for people to respond that yes, I'm available and I'll be there in 30 minutes, whatnot, and get ready to get a complete crew ready to launch.
Had anybody told either of you, and I'll throw this out, let's start with Chief Goding, had anybody told you how many people were needing evacuation there at the campground, or was this something that you learned about later on?
So initially it was told that there was approximately 30 people, and you know, that didn't really concern us. We were just trying to get the bird ready first of all. So if that number was going to grow, that wasn't a concern at that particular time, whether we needed more aircraft or not. But initially it was 30 people, and then subsequently it turned out to be 30 families, and then subsequently it turned out to be 240 people with some pets as well.
Okay. Had either of you conducted any kind of training or planning previously for missions that might have helped you prepare for something like this?
Yeah, I think California, in the National Guard's training area, is basically all of California, and within like one fuel cycle, we can get to basically any environmental condition. And so I think we have one of the best training areas in the nation when it comes to that sort of thing. And so, I mean, we typically, at least with the actually both units, I mean, we're going out into the mountains and we are training high altitude and mountain operations, you know, every week, every day we send people out, they're going out to the mountains. And so I think that kind of normalized mountain operations for us, right? And so that helps when things like this come up, where we have to do these types of missions. Some of that, those mountain flying techniques, they're already habit, they're already ingrained into the culture. And same thing with degraded visual environments. I know we have some training areas that are extremely dusty, and so that helps continue our training and get better training for the individual crew members. So it kind of normalizes, okay, this is going to be a dust landing, no big deal. We already know what to do, you know.
Okay, not that the Blackhawk is underpowered by any stretch, Mr. Godin, but did you do anything special to your aircraft, or Mr. Rosamond, did you do anything to your aircraft to prepare to carry evacuees?
Well, the aircraft's already, you know, configured for a normal mission. We did bring out a fire bucket because initially we did not know if there was going to be a fire fighting component as well as a rescue component. So we brought out our fire bucket and had our fire bucket loaded in the aircraft, and we were intending to take it up to the rescue site. So then we had it if we wanted, and if we didn't need it, it could be left on the shoreline, or we could have just completely left it wherever it needed to be and get people on board. But then as it developed a little bit more, we knew that it didn't need to come. So we did offload it takes up some space and it's a couple 100 pounds. So that was the only thing really different that we did in preparation.
Yeah, and for the Chinook, it was much the same. We had loaded a water bucket as well, and when we found out that there was no need for that, we dropped off the water bucket. We did, however, configure for the internal hoist because we didn't know, okay, we're evacuating people. Are we going to be able to land out there? We were unfamiliar with the area, so we didn't know if we were going to be able to land, and maybe it was a hoist type of issue that we're going to have to do.
Okay, well, that's interesting. So you knew you were going to a campground, but you weren't certain if there was going to be a landing zone set up for you.
Correct.
Okay. What time did you finally get off the ground? And did you meet and fly to team up?
So this whole time, I had no idea that Kipp and his crew were activated as well. When we originally found out, and we were planning on the 30 people, we're like, okay, well, we can do that in one trip. Okay, 30 families, okay, we can probably do that in like 3 or 4 trips, so we can still get this whole thing done. And it wasn't until we actually got on station, we departed Stockton somewhere around 18:30 or so, and it's an hour and 10-minute flight down to the Fresno area for us. So it wasn't until we were airborne and came up on the local frequency for down there, the internal frequency down there, that we realized that we were going to have Kipp and his crew out there as well.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what, probably the easiest way, maybe Chief Rosamond, maybe you start. What from liftoff, walk us through what happened that evening.
So once we took off, we knew what we didn't know, right? We knew that this evacuation was going to be in a fire. We kind of knew because we were told Mammoth Pools, but we didn't know any of the fire traffic area information. We didn't know who Air Attack was. We didn't know if they were flying. We didn't, we really didn't know the pinpoint grid coordinates or lat longs for where the people were. But through some of the specialized training we do in California with Cal Fire, we knew what we didn't know, which is a whole lot different than just not knowing, right? What information you need. So immediately after takeoff, I got on the radio with the Sacramento Emergency Communication Center and started asking Cal Fire about the fire information. What's the the center point or the reference point for the fire? So I knew the 7 and 12 mile rings of the fire traffic area. What's the frequencies they're using, and started getting all of that data. Then we kind of just made some preliminary plans. We said, well, we looked at the map and like, well, we think we can go in from the San Joaquin Valley. So let's just start heading that direction. And once we got probably within, I'd say 20 miles, we were able to start hearing and get a hold of Air Attack. And so we started calling him, got our clearance into the fire traffic area from him once we explained what we were there to do. But my biggest concern at that point was I didn't want to interfere with the fire traffic area or any sort of aviation operations that were going on. So I didn't have an IAP. I wasn't, oriented on the fire, but I knew that there was going to be fire operations going on. There could be tankers, there could be other helicopters, and I didn't want to get in the way of that. So I was constantly calling Air Attack, trying to let him know my plans so that he could tell me if those were going to interfere with his operation or not. Once we got over there, I also wanted to confirm with him that where the people were and get a good lat long. It was more of I kind of knew we needed to go to Mammoth Pools, and I knew where that was on my map, but I used that kind of as a confirming tech, like, okay, you tell me what you know, that way I can confirm if what I know is correct, right? And that's when we started getting a whole lot of grid coordinates and lat longs that didn't make sense. And it wasn't that they were wrong, it was just that, come to find out, they just didn't know, right? Like that particular person wasn't really in tune with the sheriff department's operation, which was the evacuation. I mean, Cal Fire was involved in the firefighting, but the sheriff was involved in the evacuation effort. So there wasn't a whole lot of information that was shared in specifically for those.
Losing you, Joe.
Yeah, we're starting to lose you for just a second, Joe.
I can pick up.
Yeah, I was going to say maybe
Go
you could.
ahead.
Was it still
Yes.
light when you got up there? Was it you left at 1800? I don't know what time sundown is in that area. So was the first approach at least within twilight or anything like that?
Yeah, it was twilight when Joe got up there. He was about 15 minutes ahead of me, and he was able to establish communications, like he said, with the air attack, who was controlling the airspace and checking in, trying to figure out if there's other traffic in that area. Then when I came on scene, Joe had gotten in a little bit closer to Mammoth Pools and inside the fire traffic area. And then by the time I got up there, it was still dusk. We were still unaided. We had goggles with us, both crews, but we were not aided yet. We were still under twilight. I could see him, I could see his lights, him strobing, and I tried to get air attack to let me to join him so we would at least know where we were together, so there wasn't two entities kind of, on their own and link up. But the air attack, he's doing the fire, like Joe is saying. He's out there, he's got his own mission, he's got his own priorities, he's got his own brief, and he didn't necessarily know about the law evacuation mission. Whether he did or not, I do not know. But we were called out on a law mission, which was separate chain. And so it took a little bit of communication back and forth trying to tell him what we were trying to do. And he's got his priorities to drop tankers on this fire that is just growing and growing and growing. So he was trying to keep us out of his traffic area so he could get his tankers to completely do what they needed to do. So at that time, I asked Joe, being inside the fire traffic area, I was not in the fire traffic area. I asked air attack if he could give me a ceiling not to exceed, and I could transition south and try to get into Mammoth Pools on the east side, because we were currently on the west side trying to penetrate, and he wasn't cooperating. He had other stuff going on, and he did. He gave me a ceiling. He let me go around the south side of the fire and try to approach Mammoth Pools from the east side, which I was unable to do. It was just too smoky. Again, we were still unaided. And I came back, got back up with air attack. It was starting to get really close to goggle and VG time. And at that time, he was running out of daylight to have his tankers continuing to work. So once his tankers were no longer able to get in and safely and drop their retardant, then it was going to be turned over to us. And we communicated back and forth with the air attack a couple times saying, hey, we are aided. When your last guy comes through, then we are going to go ahead and proceed into Mammoth Pools. And he said, great, good luck. And, just a little aviator chit chat back and forth. And then we linked up together and proceeded up that San Joaquin Valley towards Mammoth Pools, aided.
Okay. Chief Rosamond, is your audio? Let's see if we can do a test real quick, see if you're back with us.
Yeah,
I see your video's not lagging. Yep, I got you loud and clear now again. Okay, so you made your first approach aided. I'm going to bring up a photo. I believe this is from Chief Rosamond that he took when you landed. It looks like maybe you're on a boat ramp, perhaps.
Yeah, that was after. Yep, that was after the run up that San Joaquin Valley, and when we finally made it there and found the boat ramp.
Make sure that I'm showing it does show, I believe, the scene there. And so you obviously, the Chinook has a pretty big footprint, and so there was plenty of room to bring you in. Were they able to light the area for you? How did you find out where you needed to be?
So after making the trip up the valley and dealing with the smoke and the low vis and all that stuff, and figuring out how we were going to see the terrain, we finally get to Mammoth Pools, and there was nobody on the ground that was kind of had control of the people. There was no like PC controller or anything like that. There was no real organization. So we when we were over the dam at Mammoth Pools, we happened to look out to our 10 o'clock, and we saw the flashing lights and hazard lights from the vehicles from the people that were out there. So we just went over towards them, and then we started doing a low area recon and trying to find and pick out a suitable place to land. And there were I mean, we called out a few of them between the crew and everybody, and hey, what do you think about that one? No, that's not going to work because of XYZ. You know, too steep, or there's a cliff there, or you know, whatever. And we happened to come around to the left side of the group of people, and that's when we saw the boat ramp, and we're like, we all knew almost immediately that's the spot we're going to land. There was a small portion that was about halfway up the ramp that was a little bit wider than the rest. And so we briefed, hey, that's where we're going to put the ramp. That's where we're going to put the rear wheels and everything. And we just did our before landing, and then did our landing there. We anticipated it being a DVE or a brownout just because of the sand around it, but it was going to be less of a DVE than landing on the shoreline itself. Once we got down, it ended up being 13 degrees, a 13-degree slope, and it was far enough away from the people that we didn't add any undue hazard to them.
What kind of air temperatures were you looking at, and what kind of altitude were you at there at the campground that night? I'm guessing hot and high is the apt description. So
that LZ was at 3,300 feet. But when I pulled up the some of the sense data, it was 41 degrees where we were on the ground, Celsius. So it was pretty hot, but the elevation wasn't, at least for the Chinook, I mean, it wasn't, you know, excessively high, and I didn't really have any concerns about performance at that time.
Chief Godin, was there any concerns about your aircraft as you were coming in?
No, same as Joe. That's in the performance envelope of what we do, and when we're fighting fires, it's usually a little hotter and maybe even a little higher. So it was still not too concerning, but certainly factored in when we were figuring out a performance.
Okay, Chief Rosamond, back to you. Well, actually, I need to ask a question. Who did you have with you as your crew chiefs and your co-pilots? I know that this was not a single person operation for either aircraft, and want to make sure I get credit for everybody.
Yeah, so my co-pilot was CW2 Brady Labine, who's also a qualified pilot in command. And then I had Sergeant George Esquivel and Sergeant Cameron Powell as my flight engineers in the back. And you're right, it was an extremely tight crew coordination and crew resource management mission.
And Chief Godin? And
on the Black Hawk, the other pilot that was with me was CW2 Irvin Hernandez, and our crew chief is also our SI, or our head crew chief, our trainer crew chief, and he's going to flight school, so he's already been to warrant officer school, so he's a W01, and his name is Ji Zhang.
Oh, that's wonderful. So when you landed, was there anybody, law enforcement or anybody there to help coordinate the loading of the evacuees, or was this something that the crew chiefs had to do on their own?
Yeah, like I said, there was nobody on the ground from law enforcement or Cal Fire, and so yeah, the flight engineers and the crew chief, they had to kind of wrangle everybody and organize everything there on the ground. Luckily, we did have some civilian personnel who kind of helped take charge and kind of helped organize and direct some people with what the crew members were telling them.
Okay, so you obviously there were 240 people. How many were you able to take out on your first loads?
So on the first trip out, we had 65 on board.
And Chief Godin?
I think we took 20 on the first turn.
And how many seats did you say you had in your Black Hawk? The
Black Hawk, we had 11 seats that night.
So you were already taking a fair number of people, and I think again I've got some pictures from as you were arriving. Maybe this was the second trip, I think you said, as you landed there in Fresno, and the Fresno Fire Department was there. Were any of the evacuees injured? Were you needed to provide medical attention or anything like that during the flights?
Yeah, as soon as we actually, while we were still loading, the flight engineers were telling me, hey, we've got some pretty bad injuries on a few people back here, and so yeah, we had individuals with multiple broken bones, severe burns, and just skin falling off of their body type of thing. It was it was a real dire situation for some of them, for sure. And so we communicated that to CAL FIRE operations and every person that we talked to on the way home, approach control tower, our own flight operations, just to roll in as much EMS as possible, because we didn't know if that was the end of the injuries, right? And we knew that if it was going to be hundreds of people being dropped here to some hospitals, that it was going to take a pretty big response from EMS.
So you dropped off the first load, and then did you have to take on fuel to go back, or did you just drop the people and go back immediately?
Yeah, so we dropped. We shut down because we didn't want to offload while we were still running, and we did need gas, so we got gas. And while we were getting gas, that's when Kipp made it back with his first load with the Hawk and landed at the ramp, and they also shut down and offloaded their people. And that was really, I'm glad we did that. One, we needed the gas. We had come from Stockton, but we wouldn't have been able to make a second trip without it. But it was the first opportunity Kipp and I were given to really do a face-to-face and brief those things that we are supposed to brief and really coordinate without the having to do it just over the radio and ad hoc. I mean, it was all kind of shoot from the hip, ad hoc, but we really fell back onto some of that standardized training that we've been doing for years, you know. But it was nice to be able to get that face-to-face and come up with a plan together.
What time did you lift off for your second run?
Kipp, I have no idea.
Yeah, let's see.
It's not important. I'm just trying to set up a timeline. So you arrived back for the second wave, the second loading, and this is where I understand it got interesting for you, Chief Rosamond. How many people did you load into your Chinook for the second run?
That second run, we loaded 102, I believe.
102 people. That's in addition to your co-pilot and yourself and the crew chief. So a total of 105 Correct. People on board?
106.
106 people. That's stunning. I just literally cannot picture. Well, we do have a picture. I don't know if this is the flight where it shows everybody, but there we go. That's still an impressive crowd in there. Were there any concerns about overloading the aircraft, too much weight or anything like that, performance issues? Chief Rosamond first?
Yeah, I probably would have had some concerns had I known. So the way it went was we landed and the flight engineers just start doing their job, right, which was organize and load people. And typically what happens is, you know, we'll give them a certain amount of time, and we will usually ask for an update somewhere along that time and just see how they're going, because they're doing all the hard work back there and we're just kind of sitting up there running performance numbers, right? And so we asked, hey, how's it going back there? They're like, hey, we're still loading. And there was a bunch of things going on, you know. I mean, there were some mothers, handing their babies to the flight engineers, you know, as they were trying to close the doors and whatnot. And so they were like, no, we're not going to leave mom here. So they were trying to make extra room. And there was a little bit of that panic kind of setting in with some of the people on the ground. And so they were, when the flight engineers started trying to like stop people from loading, there was a little bit of a push to, you know, people just kind of jumping on, which kind of aided in that little bit of an overload. But so once some time went by and I asked them, hey, you know, before takeoff, how many people we got? You know, what's the number? What's the count? And they were like, I have no idea. So give me an estimate, right? And they kind of look over there and like, well, it's somewhere between 75, maybe 85. I said, okay, that, you know, sounds good to me. That sounds like a reasonable number for, you know, the standing room only, like, or sitting room only, like you've been telling me. So we'll plug that in to the FMS, and it spit out a number that was well within our performance capabilities. And so we did the before takeoff and started going. And almost immediately when we lifted off, I knew that number was not true, that it wasn't 75 or 85. It had to be something. We were extremely heavy, so it had to be something more than that. But because we were on that boat launch, and the way we came up, it was we ended up drifting aft And that could have been part of the AFCG from that loading, could have been part of just the technique of coming up. But next thing we knew, we were already kind of over the water and didn't really have the option of setting it back down or anything like that. So we initially had calculated that we were going to hover at about 85% torque. We didn't come off the ground till about 92, 93, maybe a little bit more, which was just about everything that was available. And so we did this just like on the first trip. You know, we came out, made a left turn, and accelerated over the water. But at this point, so Brady was flying, and I was the non-flying pilot at that point. But I could tell. I mean, we were shaking. The vibrations were very telling at that point. And so I kind of helped Brady out, and I pulled in collective power and brought it right to the maxes. So right to 100%. We were well into our time limited range on the engine temperatures, and I just held it at max power for him. We do this as a technique when we do water buckets anyway, so it's kind of a standard call. I just told him, hey, I got your max power, and he accelerated over the water. And even then, you know, that little bit of descent, trying to get through ETL was kind of alarming. Or I really hope that we get through ETL before the water gets to us, type of thing. But it worked out. Got through ETL and started to climb out. It was a pretty slow climb. And the next thing that was important was, hey, we've only got a few minutes left in this power range, so we need to get up to our max rate of climb airspeed. So during that acceleration, that's where the vibration started getting a little bit worse, and I noticed that Brady wasn't accelerating like we had discussed, and he was staying right around, you know, 60, 70 knots or so, and we had calculated max rate of climb is around 80 knots at that weight. And so we started asking, like, hey, what's, you know, we got to get some more speed so we get some more climb, because we were seeing the smoke kind of close off some of our exit paths, right? So like, we need to get up and out of here as quickly as possible. And that's when he brought my attention to our cruise guide indicator. It's just an indicator that measures stress on the rotor system, and it was well pegged in the red. And that was in a zone that I have never really operated in before, even in the high mountains of Afghanistan and everything. So as soon as he brought that to my attention, I'm like, oh yeah, you're right, we can't accelerate anymore. So we played this game of you know, accelerating as much as we could, getting the CGI into the red, and then kind of, you know, cyclic climbing, slowing down to try to get a little bit more altitude. We were playing games between you know, our 10-minute range and our contingency power 2.5-minute range on the PTITs as we climbed. And we ended up having to climb to about 8,000 feet in order to get out of the area that was clear of smoke and get over those mountains in that area. So that whole, I want to say 10-12 minute time frame from takeoff to when we finally crested those mountains, that was an extremely eye-opening, and that was a situation that I really was not very comfortable with, but there was really no more choice left in it. And I think at that point we had stopped pulling out of the skill bag, and we were well into our you know, elbow deep into our luck bag at that point. But once we got over that little hurdle, then everything kind of smoothed out.
That's an astonishing story. Chief Godding, how was the flight in your aircraft on that second run?
Luckily, not as exciting. We had worked our performance as well, and like Joe was saying, we have the same thing, a 30-minute a TGT engine temperature limit. So we have a 30 and a 10 and a 2.5, and we were certainly using those. But that was basically all. Just when we took off and made our left turn out to get through ETL and get out over the lake and get some airspeed, we were definitely using those limits. And then past that, we were back into normal continuous power.
Okay, so you get back to Fresno, and then you both start offloading your passengers. And what was the reaction from the people on the ground when the wave just started and kept coming?
Well, when I got back, Joe was already I had already got there, and Joe came after us, and he had told us that he was pretty full. So the co-pilot with me got his camera out because he knew it was going to be a lot of people coming off the tailgate, and so he filmed it, and we counted as he was, you know, offloading all his packs and some pets as well, and counted definitely, like it says, over 100. There was a lot of people. It looked like a circus clown car, just people after people after people for minutes coming out of the back of that Chinook.
That's just stunning. So then you have to go back for load number 3, and you probably already knew that you did not have quite as many people to pick up on the second or the third load. But tell me about the third load.
So really, we didn't really know how many more people were left, because it seemed like from the first trip to the second trip, the amount of people on the ground there had multiplied. And come to find out, that was because a lot of them were already in the water on that first trip. So I didn't quite see them. So when I did the initial scan, I'm like, okay, I can see some heads out there. You know, I can see some people walking around. And then on the second trip, there were just so many more people because they had all come back onto shore. And so I really didn't know what to expect going into the third one. As far as how close we were to being done. But luckily, so on that trip, Kipp was first. Got in there and landed, and got his group out. And then when we landed, we filled up pretty quickly, and the guy said, hey, we got 37 people, and we're done. The last 2 people that were on the ground had denied evacuation and didn't want to come with. So once we verified that a couple times to make sure, yep, they don't want to come, then we took off with the last 37. And the only reason we knew we were the last ones because nobody else showed up.
It sounds, based on what you were saying, Chief Rosamond, about the performance, that you might have had some doubts initially, or might have had some doubts in flight about conducting the mission successfully. Knowing what you know now, is there anything you would do differently with the flights? Assuming you don't know what your passenger counts would be for any number of the flights, would you do anything differently?
You know, we did everything that we were supposed to. I think there was just so much unknown, and besides, I don't know. I think maybe if the flight engineers could have been able to maybe keep that mad rush from happening that they talked about, that could have helped, because we could have got them on the third trip really easy, you know, at that point. But also, like, between the first and second lift, I had asked about a law enforcement officer coming with us, because if this was a mandatory evacuation, I'm not the guy who's going to force somebody, you know, as a National Guardsman. It's not my place to force somebody onto my helicopter, right? But if, you know, and enforce those mandatory evacuations. But I felt that if an LEO was on board, then he might be able to have that sort of conversation with people. But by the time we got back on the second trip, we were told, yeah, no, the sheriff's not going to send anybody with you. So there wasn't really much we could have done differently, I don't think, given the situation.
Yeah, the crew chiefs and the flight engineers did a phenomenal job, because they're the ones that are interfacing with the civilians, and obviously they're scared, worst day of their lives. This, you know, huge noisy helicopter is 10 feet from them, and trying to coordinate and communicate with them is very difficult. So to keep them calm and try to even out the loads, the flight engineers and the crew chiefs did a great job. And the people were actually relatively calm too. They definitely wanted to get out. There was no doubt their eyeballs were huge, and they didn't, it's hard to communicate to them, hey, we're going to come back for another turn, just relax, it'll be fine, we're going to just offload these people, we'll be right back. Because of course the visibility is terrible, and they don't know that. So that's why the big influx the second time that we came in, everybody was like, hey, I'm getting on this bird, it's not leaving without me, and we just got bum rushed.
How long was it taking between landings there at the boat ramp?
Yeah, I got my times here. It says, so it was about a little less than 2 hours for the turnaround. Earlier, Joe was saying that he came from Stockton and he used up a little bit of his gas on that first trip. And you know, we could have probably done 2 turns on each bag of gas once he refueled, but the visibility was so, you know, just hit or miss. I mean, we ended up coming into the LZ 3 different directions because visibility closed down on us, and we had to backtrack and find another route into the pool area. So we just didn't want to. We didn't want to get a chance of being up there and having the visibility closed down and us getting stuck somewhere we weren't comfortable with. So that's another reason.
I've got a couple more questions before we get to our attendee questions. Have you heard from any of the passengers you carried that night?
Yeah, I did. I don't know if they all came down here to Fresno, and they certainly communicated with other people that they knew, whether it's cousins, next door neighbors, a friend of a nurse that works with this friend of a nurse, and they got word back to us there in Fresno that they were obviously very appreciative and supportive of everything we do, and everything the National Guard does and CAL FIRE does to support them on a moment's notice. And some of the ones that were severely burned were there a couple weeks later, and we tried to coordinate us coming down, and we were still on fires, and we were on different fires and different assignments and different posts, and it just never really worked out that we could go down and meet face to face. But we did get updates here and there of them getting released and being appreciative.
Roughly a week later, the Commander-in-Chief presented you and your teams with the Distinguished Flying Cross. Can you walk us through that process?
So we had, after that initial evacuation that we just talked about, we stayed on duty for another 6-7 days, something like that, and continued doing evacuations with, you know, a day shift, and we were the night shift type of thing. And then we got smoked out, and we spent the next few days smoked out, not doing a whole lot. And right about the time that we were going to get released off of that law mission we talked about, that's when our brigade commander, Colonel Hall, kind of said, he notified me. He's like, hey, you need to be prepared to take your crew and your aircraft up to McClellan on Sunday for a ceremony. We're like, okay. And he had mentioned, you know, senior Army leadership and that sort of thing, and never really connected the dots between that and POTUS. But through a little, you know, Twitter recon, I was able to kind of figure it out in my own head, but it wasn't confirmed yet. So we flew up there to McClellan on Sunday, and we met up with one of our generals here in California, who kind of escorted us around and kind of told us about what was going on, and he's the one that let us know. There was Major General Beavers let us know that we're being presented an award by POTUS, and he asked us all in the room, do you want to know what award it is? And we all kind of looked around at each other and agreed, no, let's keep it a surprise. So we went and we got our COVID tests, and then we went out to the site to do a walkthrough with the Secret Service and the military aid and that sort of thing. We did a walkthrough with them, and that's kind of where the Mill A kind of spilled the beans on what the award was going to be, and we were all kind of surprised. And so we kind of helped prepare, get aircraft towed into the hangar and that sort of thing, and then we're told, hey, oh, by the way, your families are invited. Your families can come. That was one of our main questions when we first started this whole thing, from meeting General Beavers all the way to the Mill A, was, are our families going to be able to join us? And we finally got the word yes. So then everybody's kind of on their phones telling their families, yep, you know, drive up here real quick, you know. And the next morning, we started really early in the morning to get yet another COVID test, and then we kind of waited around until that, I think around noon is when the ceremony started. But we had met with the governor of California prior to him joining the Wildfire meeting with the president, and then after that meeting, the president came in and spoke with us while he did our certificates and kind of had a one-on-one with him, and then immediately following that was the ceremony itself. And it was really an awesome and surreal kind of experience, for sure. I think, like, regardless of political affiliations, meeting those two people, you know, the leader of your state and the leader of the country, as a service member is just an awesome moment, and I appreciated it all, and so did the crews, and so did the families.
Chief Godin, do you have anything you'd like to add with that?
Yeah, I ditto everything he said. It was fantastic privilege, regardless of whichever way you lean. It was a fantastic opportunity. But just like we started, that we happened to be on duty that day because other people were working the 2 weeks previous, and they would have been us and we would have been them just as easy. We got fantastic people here protecting citizens of California every day, and it just happened to be us.
I appreciate that. One of the things I noticed while I was preparing for this webinar is the unit logo for the 40th Combat Aviation Brigade is a phoenix, a bird born of flames and born of ashes. Does that hold any new special significance for either one of you now?
You know, I hadn't thought about it until you just mentioned it.
Okay, well, I had hoped to be able to wrap you guys up by the top of the hour, but I've got a handful of questions. I don't know if you are able to stay a little bit longer. Is that acceptable for both of you? I'm
available.
Okay, I do appreciate it. We'll get to first one from Lucas Zaksurski. I apologize for butchering your name, Lucas. How did night vision goggles systems contribute to the success of your mission?
I think that the night vision goggles were probably a key component into the success, mainly because, and you know, Kipp kind of flew around the fire unaided there for a while, and kind of attested to the fact that it was not passable unaided. But once we put down the goggles, you could see through some of that obscuration, some of that smoke, and being that it intensified all of the fires and the heat on the mountainsides that were not visible, or some of it was visible, like obviously some of the flame was visible from the naked eye, but there's a lot there that you just don't see with the naked eye, and the goggles intensified that. And I think that's what really made the mission a lot safer, because without it, I don't think we would have been able to adequately see the terrain. And it was from the goggles being able to see the burning trees or bushes and the leftovers that were back there, and the heat that was still remaining on those mountains, that allowed us to really make out where the terrain was and where it wasn't.
Chief, got anything to add on that?
Yeah, that's it in a nutshell. The visibility was certainly an improvement, but being able to see beyond that and see where the terrain was and where the rising terrain was, to help you, keep ahead of the aircraft and keep ahead of the visibility to be able to utilize it and keep going was great.
Okay, Chief Cotting, we'll start with you on this one. This one is from Quentin Avarice. And this probably does not apply to the rescue this particular evening. Does the National Guard ever employ any special sling load rescue devices for pickup of victims or for multiple persons?
We have a medevac unit here in Sacramento in California, and they have the type of equipment, jungle penetrators and skeds, where they have patients, but they're more of a medical unit, and they do usually single person, but they certainly can pull up one person at a time, putting them in the cabin, and they have medical personnel on board the aircraft to treat them en route to the hospital or wherever they're going to be received by an ambulance. But that's not something what we normally train on. Obviously they do, because they're a medevac unit, and we don't normally do that, and we don't normally do any kind of mass casualty or any mass evacuation type training on a daily basis. If we had the need for that, if there was a training component, certainly we spend some time and effort and get trained up on it and be ready, but not as a normal thing.
Well,
and
do you think go ahead, please.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, and on that, I know there's things out there called like helibaskets and that sort of thing for some of that mass evacuation type of stuff, but the Guard is actually specifically prohibited from using it by regulation.
Chief Godin, you mentioned training a second ago. That keyed off something in my mind. Do you think that this event on September 5th might result in any kind of new training for the crews of the Cal National Guard?
There wasn't anything that I'm thinking of that was, obviously it was abnormal, but anything that needed to train on that we weren't ready to, successfully accomplish. So I don't think so, not from my perspective. There could be some training that somebody else has noticed from a different angle and says, we'd like you to get a little bit better on that. But for us, I think everything went well and successful and safely. And
it certainly sounds like it. I just didn't know, mass casualty or mass evacuations from fires, is not common. So I didn't know if that might key off something. We have a question from Mark Huber. Welcome back, Mark. Do you have any more details about the visibility and wind conditions during the evacuation, and what instruments and aids were utilized? Obviously, we already talked about night vision goggles, but anything else you might have used?
So going into the beginning of the run up the San Joaquin Valley, we have on the F model Chinook, it's all glass cockpit, bunch of sensors, right? And it tells us the wind direction. It may not be perfect all the time, but it was like, 7 to 10 knots when we started. But as we got deeper and deeper into the fire, that velocity picked up. A lot of convective heat and a lot of convective wind action there. So we when we got down to Mammoth Pools, I saw 21 knots or so. I forget what direction it was coming out of, but yeah, so it was around 20 knots or so at Mammoth Pools, and we also used we also have like a moving map on one of the MFDs that has terrain banding. So I was able to turn that feature on and see what terrain was above me and what wasn't, even with that low visibility. I was using things like aircraft cursoring to kind of get a gauge of how much visibility we had. I could put a cursor out in front of the aircraft symbol and it'll give me a distance. So when I, found certain significant features, I'd stick my cursor on it and just kind of gauge how much visibility we might have, and it wasn't that much. And then really, once we got the word, after the initial confusion of where people were and where we needed to go, we simply asked, hey, are the people at Mammoth Pools? And when we got that confirmation, yes, they're at Mammoth Pools, I was able to just drop a point on the map and say direct to, and that made that kind of made the planning there a little bit easier.
Okay, very nice. From Robert Castillo, it looks like he was asking this specifically for Chief Rosamond. Did you go into contingency power, and how long are you able to operate in contingency? Looks like, I apologize. Did you have to perform any major maintenance afterwards to get your aircraft back in service?
No, there was just an inspection. We did have to, I know we were in the 10-minute range for a while. We might have been at the very top of that and maybe right at the bottom of contingency power, maybe a small excursion into it. But typically that's left for single engine operations. And it's not to say that we didn't use it dual engine, but afterwards, I called our maintenance officer in the middle of the night. He answered the phone. I'm like, hey man, I think we might have just overgrossed the aircraft, and I know for sure that we had a little transient over torque. And he was awesome. He reassured me. He goes, look, it's no problem. Those numbers don't sound like anything that's going to cause a major issue. We'll write it up for an overgross inspection and an over torque inspection, and when you get back, we'll do it. But continue driving on. So nothing major.
Good to hear. From Taylor Dodd, it was how much blooming on the goggles did you experience from the fires?
Well, luckily, only from my perspective, when we came and landed on the boat ramp, the flames are right in front of us. So at that time, there was definitely some washing out and getting too much light into the goggles. But for the flight in and out, it was burning in pockets, and it wasn't flaring too heavily to shut down the goggles or to wash out the goggles. So it was just here and there every once in a while, and you could just look away. If you started to experience that, then you just don't look in that direction and have no problem at all.
Okay, I've got one final question. It's from Mark Minnie. Which movie studios have approached you for your story?
None directly.
Okay, well, then I'm going to ask a follow-up question. Who would both of you like to play you in the movie that may be made out of this?
Kipp,
I'm going to retire in a couple years, so I'll be available.
there you go.
Gentlemen, I can't begin to tell you how much I appreciate your time and assistance this afternoon. The work that the California National Guard does is always extraordinary, but I think you took it to new limits on September 5th. Obviously, this was a heroic operation, and you were justly rewarded for it with the Flying Cross. Congratulations for that. And again, thank you for taking your time with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks
Dan.
for having.
We will continue now. I'd like to bring Chris Martino into our webinar. There's Mr. Martino.
Hey, Dan.
Well, Chris, what can you say about the 40th Combat Aviation Brigade?
Well, I tell you what, when you asked me to come on, I was double thumbs up, and now I'm completely humbled having to follow in these the footsteps of these two fine gentlemen and their crews. Holy moly, what a mission! That's it's very impressive.
I'm going to turn my camera off, and I'm going to let you talk about your fire conference that's coming up.
Okay, and I appreciate that, Dan. I promise I will keep this short because I know everybody is working on a schedule right now. So I appreciate this opportunity, and again, I promise to keep it short. I'd like to take just a couple of moments to discuss the HAI Aerial Firefighting Conference that we have coming up in just a few weeks. And as many of you know, we hold this event every year in Boise, sometime in the November timeframe. And each year it draws hundreds of attendees from across the rotorcraft aerial firefighting industry. In it, we discuss the issues which are critical to aerial firefighters, but we also discuss those issues, the full scope of issues that impact the industry that supports that mission. So it's not just the aerial firefighters, the operators, it's the full scope of the industry. It also includes participation and contributions from the agencies that are key stakeholders in the U.S. region, so the Department of Interior, U.S. Forest Service, etc. So it's a great event, it really is, and this year it's going to be a little bit different. And as always, safety is going to be at the forefront of it. HAI is all about safety, but again, within the scope of these events, we really like to be able to provide information to the operators that can help them be more effective and more efficient. So this year, again, we're still having the event, but it's going to have a little bit of a twist. So Dan, if I could ask for the next slide, please. All right, so this year we are going virtual. And this is for the first time ever. This annual event is going to be held in a completely virtual format. And we're very excited about that. And I'll touch on that excitement in just a moment. But first, I'd like to share just some of the basic information with you for your planning. You know, the virtual conference is going to be held over a 2-day period. And it's going to be on 17 and 18 November. Those are the same days as the original in-person event. And we did that, and a lot of you will probably recognize that, but we did that to minimize the schedule shuffling for those that were already planning to be in Boise. So hopefully that helped out. And to support our international partners, you'll see that the events will start at 4 p.m. each day, and that's 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's going to allow more folks from across the globe to attend the events. The sessions on each day will be about 4 to 5 hours long, and that's going to be 4 and 5 hours of really great content. But most importantly, this is a no-cost event. It's absolutely zero cost to register, so there's going to be no cost to you. So as I stated earlier, we're excited, and I'll share a little bit why. You know, with in-person events, we're somewhat limited to the number of presenters and the scope of the topics that we can cover, but nearly all of those constraints go away in the virtual environment. You know, a virtual conference, it really does. It can reach attendees that normally wouldn't be able to attend an in-person event, which means that we're going to have the ability to have a global audience. We're not going to just have individuals attending who are involved in the aerial firefighting industry, but also folks that are perhaps interested in the aerial firefighting industry. So we're already seeing those demographics in the hundreds of registrants that we have that have already been submitted to come to the conference. So as a result, the content for this year's event is going to be modified just a little bit. So Dan, can I get the next slide, please? So this is just a quick peek of the variety of sessions that we have in place for the conference. For those that are regulars to the conference, you'll see that you catch on it immediately that the topics have been expanded. So in particular, what we're excited about, we're happy to be able to provide our expanded sessions, which focus on, for example, the international aspects of the industry, providing guidance to young professionals, folks that may be in flight instructors right now or working some other portion of the industry that have an objective or a dream to be in the aerial firefighting sector. And then obviously we want to look both at aircraft and at technological equipment advancements. So we would like to be able to give you a glimpse of those things that are up and coming. And as always, the focus is on safety. It's going to be embedded across every aspect of the content that we're providing. So the question is, how do you learn more about it? So can I get the next slide, please, Dan? Thanks, Dan. The easiest way is to go to our rotor.org website and click on the events down drop. The specific link to the conference is listed right at the top of the slide right here. So when you get there, you'll see the screen that we have up right now, which provides the basic information on the conference, but it also gives you the opportunity to view the event schedule, to register for the event, and then also, if you're interested, to be a sponsor for the event. Pretty easy, right? Next slide, please, Dan. Okay, thanks. So what I cannot do, unfortunately, as I promised to keep this short, is I don't have time to go through the entire agenda with you. But you can very easily do that by getting on the website and just taking a look at the full slate of sessions. But what I did want to do is just, in a couple of minutes that I have, is to give a glimpse of what you'll see when you click on the View Schedule button. So what you're seeing on the screen right now is just a clip of the day one agenda. But from the snippet, I think what you'll immediately see is that the conference covers a wide scope of topics. So when you look at the full agenda, you'll see that this diverse content carries throughout the entire two-day period. And those topics are being presented by folks that are absolute top leaders within the industry. So again, we're very lucky to have the participation that we have from the individuals that we have. So I'd urge you to go ahead and take a look at the full conference agenda. And if you're interested, register. It's free and it's easy. Last slide, please, Dan. All right. So once again, thanks again. I just wanted to show you one more time. This is the link to the website. But thanks for giving me the opportunity to provide a quick look at what we have coming up here. I can assure you that the HAI staff is working hard to provide each and every one of you a valuable and enjoyable event. And we're excited about it this year. So we hope to see you all there. And with that, Dan, I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate your coming on to bring us some information about the firefighting conference. We will actually, in November, during the week of the firefighting conference, we are not going to be holding a regular webinar that week, so that any of you who are interested in attending some of the events or wanting to view the videos later will have that opportunity. And we'll make sure that we send out links for all of that. That does bring up some of our little housekeeping for the final bit, the final minute. We do ask that you save the date for the next week's webinar. We have a briefing from the HAI working groups. These are some of the top industry leaders in action. These working groups are designated by the HAI board of directors to investigate issues that are relevant to the helicopter industry right now. The people that are operating the aircraft are actually the ones that are helping to solve the problems facing our industry right now. We've asked three of the chairs to come in and discuss what their working groups are doing right now on your behalf. We'll also remind you that coming up on December 10th, we have FAA Administrator Steve Dixon joining us for a Q&A with our President and CEO, James Viola. All of our webinars are at 4 o'clock Eastern Time. We do send out emails, social media posts, and Rotor Daily links to these webinars. We ask that you watch for those and sign up when you can. We also have surveys coming out very shortly. We do ask that you take a minute to respond to that. Please tell us what you'd like to know, what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong with the webinars, or if you have concerns about HAI in general, please use the email address president@rotor.org. Jim Viola does see every email that comes in, and he does delegate those emails to the staff for action. Until next week, we do ask that you fly safe, that you be safe. We do appreciate your time. We certainly appreciate the assistance from the California Army National Guard, the 40th Combat Aviation Brigade, and we look forward to speaking with you again next week.